But in studio, it is fantastic because the Heritage Foundation has descended upon us, and we have Hans von Spakovsky, Jim Carafano, and Genevieve Wood in studio with us right now. Join us on the Annie Frey YouTube channel to watch. Genevieve, thank you for being here today. It's exciting to have you in studio with us.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
I'm looking forward to the event tonight. Jim Carafano is going to do news reports for us here in a little bit. From what I understand, he's practicing for the break.
Yes, I am.
Are you? It's a lot of pressure.
I was going to do, you should feel good because I was going to do traffic.
Yeah.
But then I thought, no, people might die if I. So
yeah, you don't want to mess
we're not
with
going to
that.
do that. We'll just invent some really bad.
You don't have to invent.
No, actually, with Biden, you don't have to invent bad news. Yeah.
We should have a Pete Buttigieg traffic report. Why are we not doing that?
Oh no.
Hans von Spakovsky also in studio with us. Hans, thanks for being in here with us.
Sure, and I'm not going to do the weather.
Not going to do the weather. I mean, we have a window, and the weather report is that at least downtown it's wet. That's about it for right now. So we're going to be out at the Tapawingo Golf Course tonight for a great event with you. I'm excited. It's sold out, so encourage people to make sure anytime we have these people in town, get your tickets as soon as you can. I'm going to start with you, Hans, because it's indictment central. And having you scheduled regularly on Thursdays on the show, I just know that at least at Thursday at 12:25, I'm going to be able to ask all of the questions. And I'm kind of going to ask each of you this same question, but in your different lanes. What do you think is a conservative blind spot right now? Watching all these indictments come in for Donald Trump, it's a pretty easy narrative to say Donald Trump is part of a two-tier justice system and everything is against him and he's running for president. Do you think that there are blind spots that exist in this story, in this narrative surrounding this particular issue?
Well, I think folks need to realize that this isn't just a problem for Donald Trump. This is a problem that has been growing inside the entire criminal justice system. And it extends from the Justice Department, which has become a political weapon. I mean, like something you'd see in a third world country. And all you have to do is contrast the maximization of charges against Donald Trump and the minimization of charges against Hunter Biden to see that graphically. But think about all of the bad local prosecutors that have been elected through huge amounts of money from the left in cities throughout the country, also as part of the defund the police movement. And you can see why crime rates, for the first time in decades, have been climbing in major cities across the country. So it's a problem in an entire scope of the criminal justice system.
I do think it's super simple to get wrapped up in the Trump part of the issue.
Right.
When you, if you're somebody who pays attention, I always say, like, right now it's just the nerds that are paying attention. It's us in this room who know what's going on. It's 450 plus days until the election. People will start paying attention soon, but it can all be about Donald Trump. Jim Carafano in here with us. You are a foreign policy expert, our go-to each Tuesday at 1:05 here on the show. When Donald Trump is part of that conversation that we have on a regular basis.
Right.
It's easy to compare the end of Trump's presidency to day one of Joe Biden's presidency.
Yeah, not in a good way. But, to go back, look, we have had the weaponization of government is not new in American history. If you go watch the movie Oppenheimer, where political enemies weaponized to go after him, or Nixon doing obstruction of justice. But here's the danger, because I've seen this in other countries around the world. When this becomes institutionalized as part of the political system, because you can't make government that's people-proof, right?
Right.
I mean, the founders understood this. There was no structure of government that they could create that would protect people from their government, because the government's run by people, right? So the notion of government, people-proof government, that's just nonsense, which is why we have elections. But if the weaponization of government as a political instrument becomes institutionalized, becomes something that's normalized, which we've now seen under 2 terms of Obama and Joe Biden, then that is a different system. And I've seen this happen in other countries. And my answer is it never ends well.
Are we there? Are you warning us that it's coming?
No,
Jim, or are you saying?
No, I mean, I'm just saying so when somebody tells me that Biden is corrupt and abusive, I'm saying, like, have you not tracked this man, his entire political career? He has no scruples. I mean, won't even pay his gardener, for God's sakes. But if this becomes the normal way of doing American politics, then you become a different country. And I've seen those different countries.
Genevieve Wood in here with us also. When you are looking at the big picture right now, because everything gets wrapped up in elections, and there's really so much more to it, because it kind of becomes sport for a lot of people when they're paying attention to. I just see streams of, you could almost chart them, narratives. They're in kind of conservative media, things we talk about. We kind of like the dog whistle. We go this way, left, and then we go right. And we talk about the same things all the time. But I don't always feel like we're progressing very much in our conversations. Do you feel like there are conservative blind spots out there that you would like people to identify before we get to the election season?
Well, I mean, Hans started with it, but I think the idea that, just the bad stuff is happening in Washington, or it's just happening in cities, or it's just happening in state capitals. I mean, we talked earlier today about the little boy who, can't wear the shirt to school that says there are two genders.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a kid in 7th grade. They're coming after him. They're coming after his parents. That's not just happening in New York City or Chicago or St. Louis. That's happening all over the country in little communities that you'd be shocked by. And so the idea that's like, well, Trump can't say that the election was stolen, or he doesn't believe the election results. What when they say you can't say those things, or that you don't like the way the government's doing something? And it's not that far-fetched to say there aren't people out there, many of them in public office, or in many cases in government agencies who are not elected and you don't know where they are, writing up these rules and regulations saying that you can't do these things. And so there's hardly an area of life where government is now not somehow in it.
Yeah.
And that's scary. And people need to understand that it's not just big government, it's government everywhere.
I think you brought up education, and the pandemic did as much horrid awfulness that existed out of the pandemic. As far as the education system goes, there's been a bright spotlight shined on how decisions are made and what are the priorities when those decisions are made, the publicly funded education system that we have. And then I've seen recently this survey that came out that young men are becoming, or like teenage boys or whatever, becoming more conservative, but young females are becoming more liberal. What do you make of that, and what we need to do I always talk about conservatism, but it's really more like constitutionalism. Like, get back to the idea of just small government. You're going to have problems. You're going to have to figure out how to solve them. And you're going to find that you would like to have a lot of say in how those problems get solved for you.
That's right. Well, I mean, for some time, our society, certainly schools, have been going after boys. It wasn't good to be a young boy in school because increasingly things were skewed towards girls. We may see a backlash now that all of a sudden, though, you have some guys who can't make it in guys' sports. Now they want to enter the women's arena. And now women's sports, and you have people saying, like Martina Navratilova, who's never been considered a big conservative, saying, wait, this isn't fair. So sometimes when you start tasting the medicine, unfortunately, sometimes that's what it takes to make you realize we need to relook at how this thing's going.
How do you, Jim, when you're looking at the direction the country is taking right now culturally, compare it to other countries around the world that, we're a free country. We're not the only free country that exists in the world, but it seems as though we're just willfully handing over a lot of these things that cause us to be different and divided because we disagree.
Well, that is a really interesting question because, I'm in the camp that thinks we've actually hit peak woke in America. I mean, you talked about, some people becoming, like groups becoming more conservative. Because when you've reached the point of utter idiocy in your policies, right, and the hypocrisy just becomes so obvious, then people start to think for themselves. And what's interesting to me is I go around the world, particularly in Europe and Latin America, I see them looking at us and going, whoa. We're starting to see that here in our countries, whether it's in education or gender issues and the other issues. And they don't like it, or they have very, very intrusive, governments, and they're saying that they can do that to us. So I actually think that we've become kind of the world's petri dish, and we're demonstrating what wokeness looks like, and I don't think it plays very well anywhere.
Hans, the First Amendment is important.
Under attack, too.
Well, that's my question to you, because we say this all the time, like, you don't have to protect comfortable speech. You have to protect the uncomfortable speech. And you have to go hand in hand with your fellow Americans to say, I'm willing to protect your uncomfortable speech. You need to protect my uncomfortable speech. How dramatic is that assault on the First Amendment right now?
It is extremely dramatic. And while we believe that, that is not what the left believes. They want to silence anyone who disagrees with them. And if folks want to know how bad this is, look, I wrote an article recently about this court case. You know, it was Louisiana and Texas sued the administration over the fact that the administration was intimidating, threatening, and coercing social media companies to censor accounts of Americans, their opinions. And it wasn't just on the election. It was also on COVID. It was on criticisms of Joe Biden and the economy. And that order by that judge, you read it, I don't care if you're a conservative or liberal, it should scare the heck out of you. And to show how bad things are, look, the judge issued a stay. He said government agencies can't communicate with social media companies for First Amendment protected speech, but it's okay for them to contact social media companies if it's a national security issue or an issue related to a criminal matter. The Biden administration appealed that. They appealed. They want the ability of government agencies to censor First Amendment protected activity. What does that tell you about that?
And let me, how bad this can be. Look at Brazil, because Brazil is really interesting. Brazil, in the Constitution, you do not have a guaranteed right of First Amendment of free speech. It's not guaranteed in Brazil. So they elected a leftist president. They also have a Supreme Court, which is accountable to nobody. It has its own police force. It can actually arrest, try, convict, and imprison people on its own authority. So in Brazil, they essentially shut down conservative opposition. They went to every major social media platform and they said, if you don't deplatform these people, we're gonna fine you $20,000 an hour. So in Brazil, there are independent media that one guy I talked to, he had 70 employees. He was on multiple platforms. He had reached the point where his media presence, he was a conservative, was so large in Brazil that he was going to convert that to a commercial media empire. And overnight, they wiped out his entire livelihood and they drove him out of the country. That's where this could go. That could happen here.
You're saying this is happening in Brazil and people are going, Jim, that's not going to happen in the United States. You're saying pay attention.
But only because we have a First Amendment. We have a guaranteed constitutional right. And the kind of thing that Hans is talking about is people are saying just because it's written in the Constitution doesn't mean that it actually has to exist. And so when you have a political opposition that starts to look at constitutional rights as a speed bump to a better world, that's when you are 5 minutes away from being Lula's Brazil.
Well, that's lovely. I want to.
Although you do get Mardi Gras, so there is that.
Yeah, is that a trade-off?
And Rio and Festival and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, that's how we get into these conversations. It's like they tell you, here's the trade-off, but it's always, we'll provide you the security for a massive amount of your liberty, and you don't get that back the way you gave it up. Let's take a quick break on the Annie Frey Show. We've got Hans von Spakovsky, Jim Carafano, and Genevieve Wood right here in studio with us. A little precursor to the event tonight at Tapawingo Golf Course. We have a sold-out crowd. Thank you to everybody who has bought a ticket and will be out there tonight. Can't wait to see you. When we come back, I'm going to ask all three of you questions about social media and messaging, and what I'm going to ask you, is it mind control? So we'll ask the crew here, the panel, when we come back about that. There's a lot of different ways to discuss it, so stick around. We'll be back with more on the Annie Frey Show in just 1 minute.